Well, Henry Johnstone, thank you for joining me on the show.
Hello, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure, sir.
Let's kick things off. I think there is a question I like to ask everyone, which is, how do you do what you love and love what you do? What got you into coaching?
Good question. How do you do what you love and how do you love what you do? I think that is definitely a process of being very, very brave. Actually, no, very, very courageous and taking risks. Because, I mean, I wasn't lucky enough to be born into what I love doing. I had to go through a significant amount of pain and suffering and feeling lost and profound meaninglessness to get what I love to do. That was my journey. But I think you get signs of things that you love to do, things that are effortless, that make you feel filled with joy, they give you purpose. Mine was always helping people. I always got so much joy out of helping people. I was the kid in the neighborhood who would go around if someone was ill, and I'd pick them flowers. Just be like, hello, I'm Henry, you don't know me, but have some flowers, I hear you're ill. You know, it's like that kind of giving of love. And then, you know, through my journey, shit happened. I wasn't able to do that. And now I've come to be like a 37-year-old man, and I'm able to give and receive love freely. And that is very much at the center of what I do. And I absolutely love it. Like when I was first started setting up my business, I remember saying to my partner, it's like, never has one man done so much for so little and enjoyed it so much.
Often, yeah, giving really pays dividends. You know, when you give first, you get paid back like just tenfold. Call it karma, call it whatever you call it, but it just comes back in waves, I think.
I think that's this thing, you know, there's a lot of speak about abundance being flung around. And I think abundance is simply the mindset of giving and being able to receive. That's all it is. And if I give out love, then I'm aligned with my value of love, and I'm more ready to receive it because I'm more open to it.
I like that. We'll jump into that a bit more. I'd like to understand a bit more about like what life was like growing up for you.
Well, that's also a very good story. I'll try and condense it. So I was like a beautiful kid. I was super imaginative, very, very sensitive, very, very emotional. I had quite a high amount of, I had an emotional need to feel love. And that kind of kept me kind of strong. And then I'm going to go back a bit. Mm-hmm. So you asked me the question again, Paul.
Tell me a bit about what life was like growing up for you.
All right. So I was born into a really, really lovely family. Mum and dad are both pretty high up in the education system, very academic. Both my brothers are super lawyers. That's how I would describe them. Both my mum and dad are super teachers. And we kind of moved around a lot around England because my dad would get a new job. So we'd live in a city for a couple of years, and then we'd move to another one. It was, you know, it was a stable, beautiful life. I couldn't complain about it. I think the only thing that really caused me any problems was me. I was very different from my family. I was very in touch with my emotions, like giftedly so, from a very young age. And my parents, bless them, and my brothers, bless them, they didn't have the tools to be able to communicate on that level with me. So I soon kind of begun just to hide that part of me. And you know, as a child, if you start hiding something, then it's going to come back and it's going to bite you in the arse. And that kind of set the path that I was to follow. And it all kind of hit a point when I was 13. I went into boarding school. I don't recommend boarding school. Some people, you know, love boarding school. Everyone I've ever spoken to was like, oh my God, boarding school was awful. I went to boarding school. It was a very masculine, sort of erring on hyper masculine kind of microcosm, like a mini society, which, you know, as the child I just didn't get my emotional needs met, and I felt very, 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 very isolated. And that manifested in all kinds of kind of horrendous behavior, which then led me to being institutionalized when I was 14. And then from that, and my inability to get my emotional needs met, or actually to be myself, kind of funneled me towards addiction and depression, which is, so happy life through boarding school. Oh shit. That's how it went.
Interesting that you say that out of all, I mean, and I've got a couple of questions around it, but out of all of it, you just wanted to be yourself. And that was sort of the final point of maybe coming out of that later in life. You've now come to see that is just you being yourself, with full of love, and as you say. I mean, as a 14-year-old being institutionalized, what was that feeling of, going into that institution? Was it that you felt that was what you needed, or were you sort of, this is wrong, I shouldn't be here? How did that feel?
Do you know what? I don't know about anyone else when they're 14, but my context of the world was very limited. So I believed what people told me was best for me. So I got moved to this psychiatric hospital where I was an inpatient, and they tried to fix me. I didn't necessarily know what was wrong with me, and I think that's part of the problem, because I wasn't included in all the processes. I didn't really know why I was there. I didn't know why these nurses were putting me in ball pools and getting me to throw them at the walls. I didn't really understand that anger was something that needed to be expressed, and all this stuff. I felt kind of just like I was going with the flow, because that's what I was told was best for me.
Right. Yeah. I see. Can you maybe take us through? I mean, obviously, like you said, you mentioned through addiction, and how would you, once you sort of came through that into later teens and so on, how would you say you managed to sort of get through work and so on, and living life, as well as also having an addiction and following that path? Is it something you managed to balance quite easily, or did you just kind of dive into addiction?
I think for kids, I think it's quite easy to maintain addiction, because there aren't that many responsibilities on you. Like, I wasn't the main breadwinner, so no one was going to notice that I was spending all my money on drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Kids are kind of expected to go out and to socialize and to come back late, so there was a period of my life between sort of 15 and maybe 22 where it all just went under the radar. It was no cause for concern, because also there were a lot of people doing it, and addicts are very good at finding other addicts that they can collude with. Because I may well have found that with some people, they were stopping drinking at 6 and being perfectly fine with that. I was never like that. I was like, hell no, I want to carry on drinking, because I literally can't stop, but I love it. So I'd find other people who I could do that with, and then it would just become like normal. So it wasn't that there were no there were a couple of blips showing mood swings. I was a prolific thief. I'd steal a lot to fund my addiction. That was one thing that marked me differently from other people in my peer group and my parents. Been like, why is this child stealing? Why does he need to steal? He's got a job. And then there was the consistent kind of losing of jobs, because I had no respect for the people who were hiring me, and I just didn't understand how people were supposed to act. I only knew I was going on pure instinct, and at that time, my instinct was, at the base of it, was to avoid myself and to do whatever it took to avoid myself. If work got in the way, I'd get another job. I
see. Because that 15, late, let's call it late teens through to early 20s. It's, I mean, at the time, I doubt you called it addiction. You probably called it partying, right? Because my experience of my early 20s, I now see that I had an addiction back then. And for me, it was definitely pot and just dabbling around some of the hallucinogenics and so on. But I didn't see it like that until now. I can reflect and go, like, yeah, it was fun, but I can see that it was a bad habit, and definitely brought in an addiction. So yeah, I guess you call it partying at the time. But then it's only on reflection that you see that it's something more.
Yeah, I think that there's also something really interesting in there, is that while we grow up, we look for an identity. Like, identity is so key to human development. And like being a kid, making that transition from being sort of perhaps mollycoddled or not, you know, like being taken care of, into being autonomous, you look for an identity. I looked for an identity. As a man, I was being fed all these thoughts and ideas of what a man should be. I was like, okay, like which one of those can I adopt? And like none of them really fit, because I couldn't be like the main breadwinner. I wasn't huge and muscly, and I certainly wasn't James Bond. And I grew up watching a lot of James Bond films, and the guy was a complete bastard. Jesus Christ, you know, what kind of message to send young children that this is what a man was. The one thing that I really did identify was the guy who didn't have any responsibilities and was in pain and used drugs. Like, I could get on board with that. I was like, I don't want any responsibilities. I love taking drugs. So I will adopt that identity. And that's what I did. I started to perform that role, which made the most sense to me, you know, I think that's so key to men and boys growing up, is that we've just got to be vigilant about what kind of message we're sending them.
So you performed that role. It was an Oscar-winning role that you performed.
It was a what, sorry?
It was an Oscar-winning role that you performed as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, man. Yeah, I was on that podium. And do you know what? That's so funny you say that. There's a glory in it. You know, there's this...
badge of honor.
There's this pride, of like, I don't have to show people who I really am. I can just show them this front that I have. You know, I'm going to hide all my feelings. And like a knock-on effect to that is, I think boys is a really good example of this. Is, you know, when kids are growing up, you give a girl a doll, but you give a boy a gun. You know, it's like the boy, when he has a gun, he doesn't need to explain how he's feeling. He doesn't need to communicate. He just points the gun and people know exactly how he's feeling. And that's what I did with my emotions. You know, I put up a barrier. I made it so that no one would ever have to ask me how I was feeling, because they would know. I thought that by performing this role, I would be seen as a man who was in turmoil, tortured man, you know, this kind of, tortured, tormented hero of sorts. Mm-hmm. That was the identity that I wanted.
Wow, that's really interesting insight. How was things with your family at that time of life?
Pretty strange, to be honest. They kind of, as I came into doing, from the time after my GCSEs to doing my kind of A-levels and going into early 20s, that's when it got really, really dark. Really, really dark, because I was just off, and I was stealing from them. Like, I was frauding checks, and like, I just break into, like, to backtrack, like, because of my using, my relationship with my parents broke down completely. Like, I turned into a monster to their, you know, and there's nothing they could do. So they kind of, I left the house because of the shame and the guilt that I felt around what I was doing. But I also had this compulsion to just keep on using it. I couldn't control it. I was totally powerless to that compulsion. And it got to the point where I was sleeping on the streets of Manchester. To get these checks, I'd break into my own house. You know, I'd kick the door down. And we're talking like, this is a big door in a very affluent, well, not very affluent, but in an affluent neighborhood, you know, and I kick down this massive, thick oak door, get in, find the check, and leave. And I just keep on doing that over and over and over again. My poor parents, you know, that is a point of shame and a point of guilt that I've worked so hard on to accept. And I've rebuilt the relationship with my family, but no word of a lie, it was broken. You know, my dad used to find me sleeping rough and beg me to come home. And I'd just get up and I'd just walk away from him. You know, there was I brought out monsters in all my family, you know, because that sometimes when you push someone that you love so far and you back them into a corner, they can only lash out, because it's only the extreme kind of behaviors that, you know, it's the last resort. So I lost all contact with my family. by continually just doing hideous, hideous things. And there's if I may just, there's the darkest moment of that, like with my parents. So it was, I was sleeping rough. I was sleeping behind bins, because bins were where it was really warm. And I just woke up and I felt this need to be with my mum. You know, it was this really childish, emotional need. And I walked back to my house and there was this little window and it was 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. And I smashed, like, I'm a big guy. Back then, I was emaciated and I just crawled in. I cut myself on all the glass. I lay on the concrete floor and I knew 3 floors up there was my mum. And I just held myself on that concrete floor and I just cried and I just wanted to be close to her. And like, that was one of the first times where things just began to shift. You know, it's like, I have nothing. This is one thing that I want. I went a little bit off tangent there, but it's there's loads of pockets of darkness all over that period of my life.
I mean, Henry, that's a really truly, I mean, shivers on my arms listening to that, honestly. Very honest of you to tell me that, so thank you for sharing it. So
it's okay.
So that was obviously a fairly pivotal point, and so how would you say the relationship is now? You've kind of worked through and you've come to this side where you are now with the family.
I have a beautiful relationship with my whole family. Like, I could cry right now if I told you. You know, I could feel it. It has changed. It took work, it took vulnerability, it took accountability, it took responsibility, it took all of those things, and it was a process. I remember, you know, I'd let them down so many times. There was no evidence to support that I was going to be any different. And they, when we kind of moved from Manchester to London, and I kind of went to uni there in Farnham. I did horrendously well, and I just lied to them all the way through. And then I came back, and it was blatantly clear that I was very, very, very ill. And they put me up, and there were so many times, like, self-harm is a big part of my story. And that's the weaponizing of emotions again. And there was this one time where I was just out my face on gin. You know, I've been drinking gin. Gin was like I use the term monster, but that was my monster drink. And I was passed out. My mum came up. All I remember, she just shouting at me, and I ran downstairs with her shouting. I just picked up the biggest carving knife I could, and just pressed it into my arm and slid it across. It went so deep that it chipped the bone. You know, it just, how it missed the arteries. You know, that was me being like, I am so fucking ashamed of myself. I am so fucking guilty of what I have done to you, but I cannot tell you, but watch this. You know, that was me weaponizing. And it was just, and that wasn't the only time. You know, I'd love to say that it was, but it wasn't. It was just this escalating. And my mum and dad were trying to hold down 2 full-time jobs. You know, they're managers. You know, they have to be in a points of authority, but they had a son who was just unraveling. And I've been through all of that with them. And I've said to them, like, you did the best that you could with the tools that you had at the time available. And they're always like, we could have done this. And I said, no, like, all the decisions you made at that time were the right decisions, because they were the only decisions you made. And we've worked together. And like, I now have a closer relationship with my mum. Like, my dad had a stroke at the beginning of the year. Back in the day, like, he actually had a stroke way earlier on in my life when I was off in addiction world, and no one could get in contact with me. No one called me because they didn't know where I was. This time around, the first thing my mum did was phone me. It's like, Hen, Dad's not well. What do I do? I was like, you do this. I'll get in the car. I'm going to Dad now. Don't worry, I've got this. And then, you know, I spoke to the whole family and I kind of organised this, and that's testament to the son that I am and to the relationship I have with my mother. I can be a son today. And like, at the end of my rehab time, like, it broke me down. My dad sent me a card, and which I didn't cry. I mean, if I cry, there's nothing wrong with it, but like, and it literally said, like, I am proud to have you as my son. And mate, it just destroyed me in the most beautiful way. It just brought down all those barriers that I've been put up and allowed me to be the child and the man that I just hadn't allowed myself to be. And I've got tears in my eyes when I think about it. Right?
So do I. This is a good opportunity, actually, Henry, to take you through the middle bits, what I call the middle bits.
Okay, sure.
It's an opportunity to throw some, so what I'd call sort of quick fire questions, but they don't have to be quick fire answers.
Okay.
Are you ready?
It's a mood.
What's that?
To lighten the mood.
To lighten the mood, yeah. So, what would be your number one tip for a fulfilled life?
Love. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Open up. Show love. Receive love. Take a risk. Jesus, just take a risk. Right? Absolutely. That is it. That is the right there. That beautiful nugget of meaning and profoundness is love.
Okay. And so for someone who might be, let's say we've got someone listening who's a bit of a stoic, that they are the man's man. And perhaps showing love is a bit more challenging for them. How do you show love? I mean, what would be something simple that they could do and go to go and start practicing showing love? Because I really truly believe it's hard for some people.
Oh yeah, oh god, yeah. It's a big block and a big barrier, and I think some of the problem is that we're told that we should, and it's that word should. It's loaded with expectation. It's like, well, I don't. Like, I'm a man. Fuck off. That's absolutely fine. Like, that happens. I was there. Find an animal.
Okay.
That is a great place to start. Like, and if you don't have an animal, then there's an object or there's something that you actually love. Like, be it, it's an experience, right? So you want to root yourself in an experience. If that's a TV show you like, or a character that you like watching, someone who you feel an affinity with, you admire, and you feel something about. Like, my point of call is always my dog. Like, that's where I started. My dog was the first being that I ever showed my true self to. My dog was the one who I cried to. He was the one who I spoke to. That was the start for me. And it's like, once you have that start, once you can recognize what it feels like in yourself, then you just use that as a signpost. It's like, I want to love my partner more. So then you go back to that thing that's, right, so I experienced love here. So I'm just going to feel that and then kind of work my way a little bit forward and see, it's a process.
Got it. And I think I do come back to this a little bit, is the love language is a really good point of reference, because if you recognize what it is that helps you feel love, then you might start to recognize what helps other people feel love, and how you can then present that to them. So love languages is a great book for that. Okay, and I mean, you're a life coach, you're a men's coach, and so coaching and mentorship is obviously really important to you. So whose work has influenced your work?
That's a very, very good question.
I stole it from another really good coach.
Oh my god! Do you know what? There isn't a simple answer to that, because it's an integrative approach from many, many different experience, disciplines, learned knowledge. There's so many. So I know I can give you two. So Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Right? That is an absolute must for anybody who wants to communicate better with people. Like, I fully recommend all my clients read it before they, it just situates why you're trying to be too much of the person that you're trying to be. It's like, step back, let the other person talk. That's really good. And this other thing, like, it doesn't relate, but there's a book called The Mortal Engines, and it's by Philip Reeve, right? It's a fiction book, and I've been reading that book, not over and over and over, like chain reading it, but all the way through my recovery. And that, it fills me with hope for humankind. It's a love story. It is so imaginative, And I feel like a lot of people, when they're asked, they list off these great entrepreneurial books. I'm like, they're great. Like, they are fabulous. But my heart, my belief system is based all over. I'm an artist as well. So creativity visionary visualization is huge to me. And the Mortal Engines is it's just a gem. It's an ever-giving fountain of fabulousness.
I love it. What would if you could think of one word that would set your intention for, say, the next 12 months, could you choose a word that would do that for you?
Oh, I probably could. Courage, I think. Like, courage, badassery, like just showing up. You know, that's a lot of words. Sorry, Paul.
I like badassery.
Courage.
That's a great word.
Badassery is good, isn't it? Yeah. Why not? Yeah, badassery. Let's go with that one.
Okay. And my last question of the middle bits is, if there was perhaps a lesson if there was perhaps a lesson you have learned that you weren't taught at school or boarding school, what would that lesson be that you weren't taught?
Vulnerability is okay.
Right. That's interesting, because that's what I was about to sort of jump into with you. So,
I was never told that.
You're not told that?
No. It wasn't in the language of my parents. You know, they didn't teach me. They weren't against it, you know, but it just wasn't in the lexicon of experience that I had. You know, the vulnerability is okay, and vulnerability is, for me, it's the courage to be open with yourself about yourself.
Right.
You know, and I was never told that what you're feeling, that's okay. You know, in fact, it's more than okay. It's great. It's not risk. And anything that takes courage, or anything that's slightly uncomfortable to look at, which being open about yourself is, like, that is courage, my friend. You are a courageous little boy. Fucking hell, Henry. You plow on, sir. You know, that would have been a great message to hear.
Brilliant answer. Okay, let's move into the second half of the interview, or the second section. So it's funny you mentioned vulnerability. I don't know if you heard my Terry Real interview, but he says running away from your vulnerability is like trying to run away from your own rectum. It'll just follow you wherever you go. That's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so weird that people, it's not the same for everyone, you know. Everyone at certain points in their lives internalizes this message that, you know, as most people, a lot of people do, a lot of my clients do, that vulnerability is a risk, that it's okay, and that you're going to stand to be rejected, disrespected. You know, you're going to lose your place in the tribe that you feel so comfortable in if you show vulnerability, you know. You cannot escape from it. Like, there are such clear signposts to every, like, and I'm going to talk about men because I mainly coach men, and women as well. I'm going to speak to men and women, but I only coach men. There are signposts that you're not being vulnerable with yourself, that you're not being open to yourself about yourself. You know, anger, mood swings, depression, feeling pressured, feeling overtly stressed, putting up that barrier that I spoke about. That's like the biggest flashing sign on the motorway that you just can't ignore, but it's right there. You know, putting up a barrier so you don't let people in. You know, all these things that counteract feeling fulfilled. You know, experiencing well-being. If you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable and you don't look inside, you're gonna feel blocked, and it's gonna be really, really painful.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same mission in that respect, aren't we? Because you generationally, whether it's generationally or just conditionally, again, speaking maybe more to men, but definitely to women as well. I mean, I recently lost a friend, unfortunately, to suicide, and
I'm so sorry.
That was female. Yeah, thank you. And that was just 2 days ago. But she was female. She was female. I don't think vulnerability or the lack of is non-discriminate. You know, it's not about whether it's male or female, but we just handle it in different ways. But if we are speaking to men, we might bottle it up, and then the pressure builds, and then crash. Or boom.
look at like the binary nature of the universe we live in. Never ever, if you bottle something up, does it release slowly and beautifully. It will always explode. Like, we are no different. There's no reason to think that if we bottle something up that we're going to somehow just, we are the soda bottle. We are going to explode. We have to learn how to open the valve slowly so that we don't spray everywhere.
So how would someone start with that? Obviously, I mean, I guess, let me just jump in. I guess the first step would be to speak with someone like you, because you can bring that out of them and help them with that journey. So how would you help, say, your clients with opening that valve bit by bit?
Well, the first thing to do is to create a space for them. It is so, like, some people come to me and they're like, I want to fix, I want it now, tell me what to do. And it's like, okay, well, I can certainly do that. All right. But there are other people who are just, they're not ready. They know that something's wrong. They know that something needs to change, but they don't know what it is. And like, what I pride myself on is creating a space, first and foremost, which is non-judgmental. It is entirely confidential, and allow them to explore themselves. And there are lots of little things before. It's so important that we feel safe when we do it. Like the example that I give to so many clients is like, tell me the last time that you went out and you went drinking. It's like, oh yeah, we did this, I did this. And the time when you drank too much and you told Dave about what happened to you when you were a kid. Oh yeah, well, I did that and I got really vulnerable and we were really drunk. It's like, what happened then? And what happens is, we might find ourselves over drinking to get to that point of vulnerability, where our inhibitions drop. We tell someone that something which is actually a big risk to us. But then the next day you wake up and you bite your fist and you're like, why the fuck did I say that? And it just puts up those barriers of like, I'm never going to be vulnerable ever again. The space needs to be there that is safe, that is encouraging, and for them. And then you can begin to unpack it a little bit, and it's like, you've got something that is knotted. It's being hidden from, like, shame and guilt thrive in the darkness. You've got to shine that light in bit by bit and just let them unfurl and unpack them slightly. It's a slow and gentle, safe process. Some of the tips that I give to people, and actually I'll speak about this bit at the end. Like, I run a men helping men group on Facebook, and we regularly have like open letter days. And open letters, like the letters that no one is going to read, like, you don't have to share them, but we do encourage people to do them. Write an open letter to someone, that, because you'll know if you're avoiding something. You'll know that there's a time in your life that is causing you pain, and it's that pain. It's recognizing that pain and listening to it. And the man who is able to say, do you know what, that hurt, that really hurt me. That is the point. That is the courage. That is the vulnerability. But in terms of, does that answer the question?
It more than answers the question. It's like the gold. That's the gold.
Okay.
Thank you. No, that was really good. And I think you made some really good points. I'm trying to think which one I want to pick up on because there's so many. I did a course once which part of the course, it was a self-development. It was Landmark. I don't know if you've heard of Landmark in the UK. It's all over the world, Landmark education.
Everything's about Landmark. That is quite intense.
It's a transformational course, and I'm not saying it's for everyone, but I did it years ago, and it was one of the things I did with pivotal things which helped me self-reflect and become more self-aware and build on my EQ, my emotional intelligence. But one of the things they did in that course was get you to write a letter to someone, and it wasn't necessarily to blame them, but it was just to say that this is the part you played in this event, whatever that event was. It wasn't about blame. You don't have to read it to them. It's sort of just to get it out. I mean, words.
Oh my God. It's that recognition of how we feel, which people who don't allow themselves to be vulnerable just curtain over that because they think that they don't, allow themselves to feel. They don't give it any recognition, which is just bottling and bottling and bottling and bottling until you're backed into a corner. When you're backed in a corner, you're going to lash out, and that, you know what, I want to say something about anger. Like, anger is not what people perceive it to be. Anger is a threat response. It is a loving emotion. It protects you. When people are backed into a corner, they get angry and they push away. That is them saying, I'm in pain. Step the fuck back. Get away from me. I'm in pain. I'm protecting myself from feeling that pain that happened to me whenever, like, the trauma or the experience happened. So many people get it wrong, that anger is yes, it's a force for violence, and yes, it's a force for aggression, but it comes from a place of protection. And when you reframe that, you're like, actually, this is a healthy part of me that I haven't been listening to. And I feel shivers when I speak about that, because it's just such a pivotal moment of, like, I'm not angry, I'm hurt. What are you hurt about? Let's talk about that.
That's a really great way of framing it. I've never heard it put that way. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, and I just want to ask one more thing about the vulnerability, the word vulnerability, because it's a bit of a buzzword, right? It's thrown around. You should be more vulnerable. You should be more emotionally connected, and so on.
Word, should, isn't it?
Yeah, shoulding ourselves. How can we rebrand the word? How can we sort of shine the light on the word in the right way, the way that it's supposed to be, so people really understand what it means?
That's a really good question. Vulnerability has unfortunately become a cliche, and a cliche is defined by something which is used over and over and over again. How can you reframe vulnerability? It's a really good question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. But I think perhaps... Go on.
I think it's non-judgment. Don't judge. Don't judge yourself. That's, for me, that's what it comes down to. I mean, vulnerability is so multifaceted, because it's a process. You can't describe a process with one word. Be vulnerable. What does that mean? Well, it means 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people. To use, it's that time when language becomes restrictive. It's like the word love. You can't describe love by saying love, really. It's very, 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 very difficult. You can't really describe vulnerability by calling it vulnerability, because it's a process. It's a journey. But at its core, it's not judging yourself. And it's being open. It's the words that come to mind to me is openness, non-judgmental, freedom, courage.
Perfect. So, Henry, as we near the end, and I feel like we could chat
on this interview.
Say again?
Great.
What's that?
I've really enjoyed myself. It's been really good.
Oh, brilliant. Me too. And you know what? It's been a very vulnerable conversation as well, and I think that's beautiful. I'd like to know, what's coming up for you. How can people connect with you? Tell us more about the Facebook group that you mentioned.
Okay. Well, the best way to come find me is on the Men Helping Men Facebook group. We're very, very active. We are growing fast. We are a fabulous group of men. Come find me there, Henry Johnstone. You can probably find me, you can find me on Facebook. Absolutely, send me a friend request. Jesus, I want to speak to you. I love making friends on Facebook. That's what it's there for, right? I'm a big believer in community. We need community. You are building a community with your podcast. The guests that you have, Paul, are building a community. It's about joining all those communities together and spreading a very unified message that you, as you are, we accept you and we encourage you to be you. Come find me on my website, which is henryjohnston.org. That's where you get the idea of, my slogan, if you will, is that I coach men on becoming fearlessly beautiful men. And if you think, what the hell does that mean? It's like, go have a look. It'll become very, very clear. And then I've developed a toolkit called Stepping Into Your Inner Warrior, which is like it's a mindset tool. It's if you don't some people, you know, they don't feel comfortable with getting vulnerable right now, but they have obstacles and issues in their life that are holding them back. That's what the inner warrior is. It's just a really nice toolkit which then men can take and they can train other men. Where else can you find me? I'm all over the place. Like I'm everywhere. Find me on lots and lots. And you get to my website, you'll see where I'm appearing on podcasts. Like, and if you're a man and you've listened to this, and you're like, I have something to say about this, contact me. Like, my podcast, Inner Warrior, Reframing Masculinity, is coming out very soon. If you want to be a guest on that, just send me a message. Like, it's about you. 100% it's about you and your message.
Love it. We'll make sure that there's links to your website, to the Facebook group as well. And anyone listening, if you want to connect with Henry, please do. Henry, this has been a beautiful conversation full of love and vulnerability, and I thank you so much for coming on with me.
Oh, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I really hope that there are people listening who, you know, kind of have hesitated about vulnerability, but now they understand a little bit more, and they can think, actually, this is my time. It's time for me to step into the unknown and see what the fuck this is all about.
Thanks for coming on.